After a year of working nights alone, my supervisor said loudly, "We only gave you this shift because you're useless around people." The others laughed. When I said, "I actually prefer quiet work," he smirked. "Figures? You're nothing without us." I let him think that until I handed in a report that quietly pulled every string behind his back. I started working at this distribution center about a year and a half ago. I was 30, broke, and coming off one of the worst years of my life. My mom had kicked me out after an argument about rent money I didn't have. My long-term girlfriend had left me not long after, saying I was a dead weight. I was couch surfing with a friend from high school who didn't even really want me there. I needed a job, any job, and the graveyard shift at this warehouse was the first thing I got. Midnight to 8. Not a lot of people wanted it, especially not for the pay they offered. But I didn't have options, so I took it. I told myself I'd stay a few months, save up, get something better. The work was simple but tiring. We unloaded trucks, checked inventory, packed orders, logged shipments. It was the kind of job where you could do everything right and nobody noticed. But if you messed up, it'd come down on you fast. I kept my head down. I worked every shift they gave me, even when I felt like I was walking through mud. At first, I didn't care much about the people there. Most of them didn't talk to me anyway. I was the night guy, the one who didn't fit in. The day crew had their inside jokes, their after-work drinks, their buddy system. We just passed each other in the hallways during shift changes. But Mark, he noticed me. Mark was one of those supervisors who liked being a big fish in a small pond. He was mid-30s, loud, always joking with the managers, acting like he ran the place. Technically, he was just a shift supervisor for days. But he talked like the warehouse belonged to him. The first time I really noticed him was when I stayed late to fix a mislabeled pallet. It wasn't my mistake, but I didn't want it traced back to me. Mark walked by with two of his guys. I heard him say, loud enough for me to catch it, "Night shift cleaning up our mess again. Good thing they don't have lives." I let it go. I figured it was a dumb comment. Not worth it. But it didn't stop there. Over the next few months, every time we crossed paths, Mark had something to say. "Look who crawled out of his cave. Did you get lost on your way home? Man, I don't know how you survive with no people skills. Always in front of others. Always with that fake grin like we were friends and this was just a joke." I didn't laugh. I didn't say much. I'd just nod or ignore him. I thought maybe if I didn't react, he'd get bored and move on. He didn't. One morning, I was double-checking a pallet because someone on his team had logged it wrong. Mark came over with two guys from his shift and said, "We only keep you on night shift because you're useless around people." A couple of them laughed. Mark smiled at me like he was expecting some comeback. I didn't give him one. I just said, "I like quiet work." He leaned in a little and said, "Figures. You're nothing without us." That one hit harder than I expected. Not because it was some clever insult, but because it felt like he meant it. Like I was beneath him. Like everyone else believed it too. I kept my face blank. I went back to the pallet. But something cracked a little inside me that morning. I started noticing things after that. I wasn't even trying at first. It was like once I stopped brushing him off, I started really seeing him. Mark wasn't the big shot he acted like. He was sloppy. Lazy. He signed off on shipments without checking them. He moved inventory codes around when something didn't add up so it wouldn't come back on him. He covered for his buddies on the day shift, the ones who would mess up orders or clock out early by doctoring reports. At first, I told myself it wasn't my problem. I just wanted to do my shift and go home. But then I started thinking about the times I'd gotten blamed for missing inventory or misfiled orders, and how many of those had really been his mistakes. I started keeping notes. Quietly. No drama. No big plan yet. Just simple stuff. Copies of shift reports, screenshots of inventory logs, dates, times. Something looked weird, I'd write it down. If an order went out wrong, I'd track who signed off on it. It helped that the day shift thought I was a nobody. They didn't hide much around me. I got friendly with the QA guy who worked nights sometimes. He wasn't part of Mark's crowd. He showed me how the audit system flagged shipments and what the codes meant. I learned how to pull basic reports from the system. Not in a sneaky way, just using my login like anyone else could have. But I knew where to look. I wasn't in a rush. I took my time. 6 months passed. I had a folder by then, a real thick folder of printed logs, copied emails, order discrepancies. I had proof of him signing off on shipments with missing products, of him moving inventory between codes to avoid shortages, of him letting his buddies fudge their hours. I even had a few quiet notes from the QA guy pointing me in the right direction. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I showed up, worked my shift, and kept collecting. Then, one Friday morning when my shift ended, I waited outside the operations manager's office. I had the folder in my hand. When she showed up, I said, "I think you'll want to see this." She didn't say much. She took the folder and told me she'd look into it. I nodded and left. No speech. No warning. I went back to work like nothing happened. Mark didn't suspect a thing. If anything, he was louder than usual that week, joking with his guys, talking about how management always had his back. 2 weeks later, he was gone. They said it was a policy violation. That's all they told anyone. But I knew. I still work nights. I'm still the quiet guy nobody talks to. And I'm fine with that. After Mark got fired, things got quiet for a while. Too quiet, actually. I thought maybe that was it, he was gone and life would just move on. But if I'd learned anything in that warehouse, it was that people like him didn't go down easy. About a month later, I started hearing little comments from the day shift guys. The ones who used to hang around Mark. They didn't say much to my face, but I caught snatches of things in the locker room. Snitch. Rat. Watch your back. I ignored it at first. Same way I'd ignored Mark. I thought they'd get bored like he did. But this time it was different. One night, I clocked in and found my workstation trashed. Pallet wrap everywhere, scanner missing, one of my gloves cut in half. Nothing major, but it was enough to make a point. I reported it to the shift lead. He shrugged. Probably a mistake. Clean it up. I cleaned it up. I said nothing. A week later, someone switched my forklift assignment. They logged me on a unit that had a known hydraulic leak, the kind of thing that could mess up a load or get you written up. I caught it before I used it. Again, no proof. It kept going like that. Little things. Missing tools. Swapped paperwork. A couple of wrong inventory logs under my name that I knew I hadn't touched. I started double-checking everything I did. I kept copies of every single report. I even took pictures of my workstation at the end of each shift, just in case. The worst part wasn't even the stunts they pulled. It was that the managers didn't seem to care. Mark's firing had made waves, but not the kind I thought it would. His buddies didn't get disciplined. They just closed ranks. The operations manager barely spoke to me after I turned over the file. It was like once they got what they wanted, Mark gone, I became a problem they didn't want to deal with. And somehow the blame for everything wrong on night shift started creeping toward me. I'd get called into the office for things I hadn't done. Why is this shipment short? Why wasn't this logged? Always questions. Never accusations. But the message was clear. I'd expected Mark's buddies to be petty. I hadn't expected management to quietly side with them. That's when I realized something else. Mark might have been crooked, but he wasn't acting alone. The shortcuts, the fake reports, the cover-ups, it wasn't just him. He was part of something bigger. And now I was the outsider who had poked the wrong hole in the wrong system. I thought about quitting. More than once. But every time I filled out the online application for other places, something in me just froze. Like I couldn't walk away yet. I wasn't done. So I changed tactics. Instead of just covering myself, I started watching them closer. I learned who handled what reports. Who covered for who. Which managers closed out discrepancies without checking. I paid attention to the shipping logs, especially on weekends when the regular crews were light. I started seeing patterns. Late-night shipments marked for disposal that never actually left the building. Products signed out under dead codes. Overtime hours logged by people who hadn't been on site. It wasn't just Mark. It wasn't just his friends. It was the whole damn chain. They weren't stealing millions. They weren't that smart. But they were cutting every corner they could, hiding losses, shifting blame, and probably skimming just enough to make it worth it. And they'd been doing it so long they didn't even hide it well anymore. And me? I was the one idiot who'd stumbled in and pulled a thread. I started keeping 2 sets of notes now. One for myself. And one I wasn't sure what I'd do with yet. I didn't know how far this would go. But I knew one thing. I wasn't backing down this time. About 2 months after Mark was fired, things shifted in a way I didn't see coming. One night, around 2 a.m., I was checking a shipment in the back loading area, the kind of spot where cameras didn't reach, when I saw the last person I expected. Mark. He wasn't wearing a uniform. Just jeans, a hoodie, and a ball cap pulled low. He was standing near one of the rear docks talking to Ricky, one of his old crew who still worked days. They were both smoking, heads close together. I froze behind a stack of pallets. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough. Ricky said, "You sure about this?" Mark said, "They're not gonna check." They never check. They stayed another minute before walking off toward the break room door. I stayed hidden until they were gone. Mark didn't even work here anymore. Why the hell was he coming around in the middle of the night? And why wasn't anyone stopping him? The next night, I stayed late after my shift ended. I sat in my car in the lot, half hidden behind a semi-trailer. At exactly 2:15, Mark pulled up in an old pickup. Ricky came out 5 minutes later, helped him load a shrink-wrapped pallet into the back. They drove off. I sat there, heart beating hard in my ears. They were stealing. Right under everyone's nose. Or maybe not under, maybe with someone's help. The next day I went to check the shipping logs. That pallet was marked as scrap disposal. Signed off by a day manager named Carlos. Carlos. Another one of Mark's buddies. It hit me then. Mark never really got fired. Or at least not in the way I thought. They'd cut him loose on paper. Cleaned house just enough to keep corporate happy. But behind the scenes nothing changed. They were still running their games, maybe even cutting him in on the side. I wasn't dealing with some petty crew messing with a night shift guy. This was a network. A sloppy, greedy network that thought I was too dumb or too scared to notice. And honestly, I almost let myself believe they were right. Until something else happened. A week later, I got called into the office by the operations manager. The same woman I'd handed the folder to months ago. She sat me down. Closed the door. Looked me dead in the eye. "We've had some reports about you," she said. "People saying you've been interfering with shipments. Asking questions you shouldn't be asking." I just stared at her. I wanted to say something. Wanted to tell her everything I'd seen. But the way she looked at me, cold, sharp, like she already had her mind made up. I said, "I'm doing my job. Same as always." She gave me this tight, fake smile. "We'll be keeping an eye on you." That was it. I walked out of there with my stomach in knots. That's when I realized how deep it went. I wasn't just fighting a bad supervisor anymore. I wasn't even fighting a crooked crew. I was standing alone in a place where even the people in charge had something to lose, and they weren't going to let some quiet night shift guy tear it down. And that's when I stopped collecting notes for myself. I started collecting them for someone else. I didn't know who yet. But I knew this. It wasn't going to end inside that warehouse. And neither was I. The morning after that meeting with the operations manager, I sat in my car in the lot for a long time before starting the engine. I didn't go home. I drove to a diner across town, the kind of place where nobody asked questions. I sat there with a cheap coffee growing cold in front of me, staring at nothing. I thought about walking away. About finding another job and letting this place eat itself alive. But I couldn't shake the fact that they'd tried to pin it on me. That they'd let me carry the weight of their lies after I'd done everything right. I wasn't a saint. I kept my mouth shut about things I probably should have reported sooner. I'd ignored the signs when it was easier. But I wasn't a thief. I wasn't a liar. They wanted me gone. Quietly. I wasn't going quietly. I spent the next 2 weeks getting every piece of proof I could. More photos of night shipments. Copies of fake scrap reports. I even used an old phone to record video of Ricky loading pallets onto Mark's truck on 3 different nights. But the best part, the part that fell right into my hands, came from someone I didn't expect. The QA guy from night shift. The same one who'd helped me before. He caught me outside during a smoke break. I don't even smoke, but I was standing there pretending to so I wouldn't have to talk to anyone inside. He said, "They're trying to pin a missing shipment on you." I looked at him. "How do you know?" He shrugged. "Carlos asked me if I'd sign off on a report saying you cleared it." I told him to go to hell. I stared at him, not sure what to say. He dropped his cigarette, stepped on it, and said, "You're not the only one sick of their crap." And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. I started talking to a few of the other night guys, the ones who'd been treated like dirt by Mark's crew for years. The ones who'd been blamed for missing inventory or written up for small mistakes while the day shift got away with everything. They were ready. They just needed someone to start it. We made copies of everything. We pooled our notes, reports, even old emails. And when we had enough, when the pile of proof felt too big to be ignored, I didn't take it to the operations manager. I took it straight to corporate. I emailed it all. Every document, every photo, every report, every video. Names, dates, times. A full timeline of theft, fraud, harassment, and cover-ups. I sent it directly to the company's ethics hotline and their head of compliance. I didn't sign my name. None of us did. We sent it as a group. For a week, nothing happened. Then, on a Monday morning, corporate landed on the warehouse like a hammer. Auditors, security, regional managers. They shut down the floor, pulled everyone into meetings, started going through records. Mark got arrested. Carlos got fired on the spot. So did Ricky. So did 3 other supervisors from days who I hadn't even known were in on it. They found thousands of dollars in stolen goods and fake overtime payouts. The operations manager? She didn't even get the chance to talk her way out. Corporate found emails between her and Mark, ones where she warned him when audits were coming. She was walked out by security before noon. They didn't say much to the rest of us. Just that they were cleaning house. The QA guy? They promoted him. Made him shift lead. Me. Corporate called me in last. The regional manager sat me down. Asked if I'd been part of the report. I thought about lying. I really did. But I didn't. I told him yes. He nodded. You did the right thing. They didn't promote me. They didn't give me a medal. But they gave me a permanent night lead position with full pay and no more interference. And more than that, they left me alone. The day shift? The ones who stayed? They don't mess with me anymore. Sometimes they nod when they pass me. Sometimes they look away. I don't care either way. I kept that job for another year before I moved on. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I walked out of there with my head up. I'm not a hero. I'm not even sure I'm a good guy. I let things go for too long. I stayed quiet when I should have stood up. I waited until it touched me before I acted. But I acted. And for once, the bad guys didn't win. They never saw me coming. And that was enough.